Hey there, listeners. We're taking a break for the holidays, but our Monday releases will continue as scheduled. We'll be back with more true horror on January 8th. Wanted to share an episode with you in the meantime, one of our favorites. Enjoy, and hey, stay safe out there.
This content may not be suitable for all audiences. Listener discretion advised.
I remember my dad yelling that he'd called 911 and they were on their way. I'll never forget what happened next. Around 3 a.m., I woke up to the sound of my bedroom door creaking open. I froze.
The way he was standing and watching us through the mask was so unnerving.
From killer podcasts, true tales of horror, bizarre happenings, unexplainable events. This is Disturbed. Hello, and welcome back to the show. This week, we're bringing you 5 stories that will keep your head on a swivel. So sit back, listen closely, and dive into the horror. First, a story narrated by Hannah Robertson from Reddit user MUK World. Nothing good ever comes out of a crawl space.
This happened to me about 5 years ago, and even now I get chills just thinking about it. I was renting a small house in a quiet neighborhood at the time. It wasn't anything fancy, but it was cozy and affordable, and it had a lot of character. The only thing I didn't love was the crawl space underneath the house. The access door to it was in the laundry room, a square wooden hatch flush with the floor. It had a padlock on it, and I'd never had any reason to open it. I figured it was just pipes, cobwebs, and the usual creepy crawl space stuff. One evening, I came home late from work. It had been a stressful day, and all I wanted was to shower and collapse into bed. As I stepped inside, I noticed something strange. My laundry room light was on. I was sure I had turned it off that morning, but I chalked it up to being absent-minded in my rush and turned it off again. That night, I woke up around 2 a.m. to a faint noise. At first, I thought it was just the wind, but as I lay there, I realized it was coming from the laundry room. A soft, rhythmic thumping sound. My heart started to race. I debated whether to get up and check, or just stay in bed and hope it stopped. Curiosity got the better of me, so I grabbed my phone, turned on the flashlight, and tiptoed to the laundry room. When I opened the door, everything was quiet. And then I saw it. The hatch to the crawl space was slightly ajar. My stomach dropped. I distinctly remembered it being locked, and there was no way I could have accidentally opened it. Trying to stay calm, I convinced myself it might be an animal that had somehow gotten in. I shut the hatch tightly and placed a heavy box of detergent on top of it before going back to bed. The next day, I called the landlord to ask if there were any pest issues I should know about. He seemed surprised and said no one had reported anything like that before. Still, he promised to send someone over to check it out. That night, I double-checked the hatch and even put a chair on top of it for good measure. I didn't hear any noises, and I started to feel a little silly for being so freaked out. But around 3 a.m., I woke up to the sound of my bedroom door creaking open. I froze. My bedroom door doesn't creak unless you push it slowly, and I knew I had closed it before bed. I stayed as still as I could, barely breathing, as I heard soft footsteps shuffle into my room. My phone was on the nightstand, just out of reach. The footsteps stopped right next to my bed. I could feel someone's presence, their quiet breathing in the dark. Summoning every ounce of courage I had, I grabbed my phone, turned on the flashlight, and swung it toward the intruder. There was a man, crouched on the floor, his face pale and gaunt, his eyes wide and unblinking. He looked just as startled as I was. I screamed and bolted out of the room, running outside to the neighbor's house. I banged on their door until they let me in, and they called the police. When the officers arrived, they found the man still in my house, hiding in the crawl space. He had a small mattress, some food wrappers, and a collection of random items he must have taken from my house. The lock on the hatch had been tampered with, and from the looks of it, he had been living under my house for at least a few days, maybe longer. The scariest part, the police said they found a notebook with detailed notes about me. He had written down my daily routine, when I left for work, when I came home, even what I wore. There was also a list of plans, though they wouldn't tell me what was on it. I moved out the next week and stayed with friends until I found a new place. To this day, I have no idea how he got into my house and how long he'd been watching me before I noticed something was wrong.
Our next story is told by Cesar Brazil about an IT job that could have led to a game over.
I'm 32 years old now, but I was only 18 at the time of my story. Back then, I worked as an assistant at the fire department. One night, a woman called the department saying that she was the widow of a deceased fireman and was looking for someone to help fix her grandson's computer. He lived with her. Since I had completed some IT courses, I was used to receiving calls from family and friends to help them with technology. So I took down her number and told her I'd call her back. I asked the sergeant about her and mentioned the name of her deceased husband. He confirmed that she was who she said she was and that they were familiar with her calls for help like this. I called her back and told her I could help. I quoted her a price for the job. She agreed, and we scheduled a day to get it done. On the scheduled day, I gathered the necessary equipment and went to the address that she gave me. It was in the city center, which in my city means old residential buildings, as nearly all buildings there are now commercial offices. When I arrived, it really was an old building, and the bell wasn't working as a man exiting the building informed me. I waited around 30 to 40 minutes for her to answer the phone and let me in. She lived on the 5th floor, and there was no elevator, so I had to take the stairs. And when I finally reached her floor, she opened the door quickly and let me inside. As soon as I looked around, I couldn't have been more disgusted. The apartment was filthy and the smell was unbearable. There were cockroaches everywhere, and I had to hold myself back from vomiting. She guided me to the computer, and as we passed the bathroom door, I noticed that the bathtub looked like it had never been cleaned. And once I started working on the computer, she kept talking about how lonely she was and how handsome I was. Remember, I was only 18 at the time, and she was old enough to have a grandchild. She offered me food and drink several times, which I obviously declined. Then her grandson came into the room. He looked about 7 or 8 years old, but he spoke like a baby. She kept telling him how nice I was and that I was going to fix the computer. The boy asked her for a cup of milk, and she left to prepare it. The entire time she was in the kitchen, the boy just stared at me. I tried talking to him a few times, but he didn't respond. I felt like I was in a horror movie and I could be the victim of a murder at any moment. I'm not sure why, but I didn't feel safe there. She came back with the milk for the boy, and I noticed she was holding a knife in her other hand. She said she was preparing lunch and went back to the kitchen. At that point, I was sure something was going to happen to me, so I quickly finished the job and called her into the room. She came in still holding the knife, and I told her I'd finished and I was leaving. She insisted that her grandson needed to test it first. Since she was still holding the knife, I agreed. The boy tested the computer and told her it was faster now. Then she turned to me and she said she didn't have the money with her. I just told her it didn't matter and that I could come back later to collect the payment. She finally let me leave, and I almost ran to the exit. Obviously, I never returned for the payment. I don't know why no one at the fire department warned me about her. I can only assume that none of them have ever been inside that apartment.
Now that the holidays are over, you might be feeling that big spending hangover. The gifts, the food, the bills creeping in like shadows under a locked door. Luckily, Mint Mobile is here to help you cut back on overspending on wireless this January with 50% off unlimited premium wireless. And look, I'm not new to Mint. I've been a Mint Mobile user for 3 years now. Leaving the big brand cellular providers was life-changing. My bill went from a couple $100s per month for 3 lines to less than $750 for the year. The service is great, affordable, and ideal for anyone who uses a cell phone. I've been telling my family to use Mint Mobile for years. Mint Mobile's end-of-the-year sale is still going on, but only until the end of the month. Cut out Big Wireless's bloated plans with 50% off 3, 6, or 12 months of unlimited. All plans include high-speed data and unlimited talk and text on the nation's largest 5G network. This January, Mint Mobile is here to help you cut back on overspending on wireless with 50% off unlimited premium wireless. Plans starting at $15 a month at mintmobile.com/disturbed. That's mintmobile.com/disturbed. Limited time offer. Upfront payment of $45 for 3-month, $90 for 6-month, or $180 for 12-month plan required. $15 per month equivalent. Taxes and fees extra. Initial plan term only. Greater than 50 gigabytes may slow when network is busy. Capable device required. Availability, speed, and coverage varies. See mintmobile.com. When it comes to home security, you want to feel like you've picked a system that actually keeps trouble away, not one that just tells you something bad already happened. That's why I like SimpliSafe Home Security. It isn't just another alarm, it's designed to help stop crime before it starts. SimpliSafe uses AI-powered cameras outside your home to spot real threats and instantly alert live agents. And that's what makes it different from the rest. Those agents actually take action while the intruder is still outside, talking to them through the camera, letting them know they're being watched and the police are on their way. And, if needed, they can blast a siren and turn on a spotlight. I got SimpliSafe a while back and I am so happy I did. It was super easy to set up, and I'm glad to have the peace of mind that my home, belongings, and family are safe. Nothing beats that feeling. Other systems might give you a camera and a notification, but they need you to see the alert and handle it. SimpliSafe's monitoring agents have your back, even when you're busy, asleep, or on a plane. They're protecting over 5 million Americans and have been named Best Home Security Systems by U.S. and World Report for 5 years in a row. This month only, you can get 50% off any new system. It's a great time to upgrade to security that actually helps stop crime before it starts. Go to simplisafe.com/disturbed. That's simplisafe.com/disturbed. There's no safe like SimpliSafe. This next story comes from Reddit user 1_son_4263 and is narrated by Dan DeGroh. I don't know whose child that is, but he's definitely not yours.
It was around 9 or 10 p.m., and I was skateboarding at a skate park around 5 minutes away from my house. I live in Las Vegas, Nevada, in not the greatest part of town, so I often have to deal with some creepy or strange people. On this particular night, I went alone, and there was only one other person at the park, a guy named Scott. I never met him before, but we got along well from the start and had a good time skating around the park for about an hour. Then, a tall man with a child came walking into the skate park and approached us. The first weird thing I noticed was that the child had no shoes and was just wearing pants and a t-shirt. It was pretty cold outside, and even in my warm hoodie, I could feel the chill. I couldn't fathom bringing a child outside in this weather with no shoes or a jacket. Even more alarming, it seemed that the tall man had a gun on him. The strange man started out by addressing Scott and telling him that he cuts hair and if Scott ever needed a barber to hit him up. Scott said thanks, and then the guy walked over to me and said the same thing. I just said, "Oh, all right, thank you," and thought he would leave, but no. He asked if his son could try my board. I was hesitant, especially since his feet were bare, but reluctantly said, "All right." The boy didn't seem to even want to try, but the man picked him up by his arms and put him on the skateboard. Eventually, the child stood on it and tried it out. Meanwhile, the guy turned to me and repeated himself, saying he was a barber and that he was just here with his nephew. I thought it was really weird that he said he was his son first and then he called him his nephew. Besides, who brings a child to a park this late at night? After about 10 minutes, Scott left, and I was alone with the strange man and child. The guy asked me to do a trick for his nephew, and while I was performing the trick, he forced the boy to watch me by holding his head in place facing towards me. Then, he repeated himself again, saying that he was a barber if I ever needed a cut, and that he was here with his son. I then asked, "Didn't you say he was your nephew?" To which he said, "Oh yeah, sorry, I get it confused sometimes. My bad." Like, what? How can you get those two words confused? I just shrugged it off and told him I needed to go. He said, "Yeah, his dad's coming to pick us up now." As I was leaving, I looked back and saw the man and the boy getting into a car. I wasn't actually ready to go home yet. First, I wanted to skate to McDonald's to grab some food. I saw the car start driving in the same direction that I was skating. As I reached the McDonald's, the car pulled into the parking lot. I went inside to order, and shortly after, that same guy walked through the door. He came up to me and said, "Hey, what a weird coincidence. I was hungry too." Then he repeated himself again about being a barber, this time asking for my number. I said, "No thanks," and left as quickly as I could. I did end up calling the police and filling out a report for the sake of the child. I also provided the cops with a photo I'd taken of the guy with his back to me. The police said there wasn't too much they could do about it, but at least I did what little I could to help.
You're listening to Disturbed. We'll be right back. A new year and colder days mean your winter wardrobe really has to deliver. If you're craving a reset, start with pieces built to last. Because nothing's scarier than stepping into the cold only to realize that your coat has the structural integrity of a haunted house. Quince brings together premium materials and lasting quality so you stay warm, look sharp, and feel your best. Quince has everything: Mongolian cashmere sweaters, wool coats, leather outerwear, and beyond the wardrobe, my most recent purchase was a set of bed sheets that have totally changed the quality of my sleep. Quince is quality, affordable, and every piece I've ordered, from joggers to sheets, is comfortable. Their outerwear is especially impressive. Each piece is made from premium materials by trusted factories without luxury markups, classic styles that hold up year after year. Refresh your winter wardrobe with Quince. Go to quince.com/disturbed for free shipping on your order and 365-day returns. Now available in Canada, too. That's QUINCE.com/disturbed. Free shipping and 365-day returns. Quince.com/disturbed. Welcome back to the podcast. Our next story is narrated by Meghan Barylak Smith. You're out watching the lake, but who is watching you?
This experience truly felt like something out of a horror movie. One night, my friend and I decided to park by a lake in our city just to chat and watch the water. The lake is surrounded by woods and various parking lots. The closer you get to the lake, the farther you are from the main road, which takes you out of the wooded area. I parked my car in one of the unlit parking lots about 5 yards from the lake and turned off the ignition. He sat beside me in the passenger seat, and we chatted for about 10 minutes while listening to music. Suddenly, he said to me, "Is that a man standing there?" I laughed and looked ahead, and all I saw was the dark lake in front of me. "No," I said, thinking his eyes were playing tricks on him. But then he pointed his finger at my driver's side window, and I turned to see a man with a cat mask covering the top half of his face, standing 10 yards away. He was just staring at me, not moving. I was immediately extremely freaked out. The way he was standing and watching us through the mask was so unnerving. I immediately started my car as quickly as I could, and the man started running towards my driver's side door at full speed. Thankfully, my doors were locked. I reversed and drove away, but just as we breathed a small sigh of relief, we saw a white truck following closely behind my car. As I mentioned, we were in a wooded area, and I wasn't familiar with the twists and turns of the dirt roads. Each turn I made, which were all wrong turns, unfortunately, the car would follow us. We were screaming the whole way, unsure what our pursuer wanted from us. Eventually, the worst thing that possibly could have happened happened. I made a wrong turn into a dead-end parking lot. The white truck parked on an angle, essentially blocking me in. At this point, I was genuinely fearing for my life. Another masked man jumped out of the truck and came at our car quick. I drove around, nearly hitting him, and managed to weasel past the truck parked on the angle. I sped out of there, finally going the right way, and eventually made it back onto the main road. The scariest part to me now is wondering what they wanted from us. It felt like more than just a prank, considering the pursuit and attempt to block us in. I don't know what kind of weapons they might have had in their car. I thought it was possibly an attempted carjacking, but if that was the case, I feel like there would have been a more efficient means of doing so. Never hang out in parking lots at night, especially in isolated areas.
Our final story is narrated by Terra Ashe from r/True Scary Stories. We desperately needed help, but not from him.
In about 1986, when I was about 5, my dad's job moved us from Brooklyn to Connecticut. It was quite a change in lifestyle. We went from a crazy, crowded neighborhood to 3 or 4 acres on a windy road in the woods. My mom especially loved the scenery and the tranquility. It should be pointed out that my mom was about 27 or so at the time, and my dad was about 30. All was fine for a while until my mom grew increasingly uneasy about a man she said she was seeing everywhere she went. When she went to the supermarket, he would be there and would smile at her. She took my sister and me to the park one day, and he was there sitting on a bench and staring at her. There were many more instances, and my mom eventually mentioned it to my dad, who I think kind of wrote it off at the time. He'd never seen the guy and figured it was just a coincidence. The town wasn't terribly big. You were bound to run into people over and over, but my mom was adamant, and these sightings began to get more frequent over the course of about a month. I was very young, but I can vaguely recall her always being on edge whenever we left the house. Finally, after one such incident, she called my dad at work crying, and she said she was now certain that he was watching her daily movements. She said she was leaving to pick my sister up from nursery school when she noticed a car through the trees on the road about 50 yards up from our driveway. When she got in her car, the other car pulled out and began to follow her. With increasing worry, she drove to get my sister and went into the school. When she came out, she saw the guy standing by his car looking at her. She had had enough at this point, and her Brooklyn kicked in. She started yelling all manner of shit at the guy, who promptly jumped in his car and sped off. This was enough for my dad now, who came home from work and promptly called the police. I remember they came to the house and spoke to my parents in the other room. As luck would have it, the police knew exactly who the guy was, as he'd been on their radar for a similar incident a few years before with another woman. However, they described him as sort of simple-minded and harmless. They said he'd never threatened anyone or done anything violent. He was just a bit of a weirdo who couldn't take a hint. And what was a stunning display of small-town police ineptitude and sort of stupidity on the part of my father to allow it, the cops said they would speak to the guy and his parents, whom he lived with, and basically tell him to knock it off again. And so they did. That very night, my parents received a phone call from the guy's parents, who apologized profusely and explained their son was a little socially off and never meant to hurt or scare anyone. They said they told him to leave my mom alone or they would get the police involved themselves. And in true, naive, small-town fashion, everyone just sort of shook hands and let it go. For about a year, there were no more sightings of him. No incidents. My dad knew where he lived now and would occasionally pass by to see if his car was at his house. It seemed that the gentle admonishment worked. However, that all changed one summer night in 1987. This part I remember well. It was about 9 p.m. and I was in bed, not yet asleep. I could hear my parents watching TV in the living room. At some point, I heard my sister leave her room and walk down the hall towards the living room. Suddenly, there was commotion and an air of panic. It appeared that my sister was having an asthma attack and was really struggling to breathe. This would be the first of many attacks that had her on an inhaler until adulthood. My dad was running one way, my mom the other. They turned the shower on to see if the steam would open up her airways. I remember my mom shouting that it wasn't working and to call 911. At this point, I got up and stood in the hallway watching this all unfold. I remember my dad yelling that he'd called 911 and they were on their way. My mom was still in the bathroom trying to get my sister to breathe in the steam. I'll never forget what happened next. I walked down the hallway towards the living room and the staircase that led to the front door. I was hoping to find my dad in the kitchen where the phone was, as I was starting to panic a bit over the situation. However, he ran past me towards the bathroom where my mom and sister were. Suddenly, at the bottom of the stairs stood a young man staring up at me, the front door wide open behind him. I yelled to my parents that the police were here, and I heard footsteps come running down the hallway towards me. It had only been a minute since my dad had called 911. I recall thinking, even at 6 years old, wow, they got here fast. My mom came up behind me and proceeded to let out the most blood-curdling scream I have ever heard. It was the fucking stalker standing, looking up at us. I hadn't recognized him, so I was now thoroughly confused as to what was going on. My dad was there in 3 seconds, and my mom screamed, "It's him! It's the fucking guy!" I will never forget the look of utter confusion on my dad's face. He had a daughter in the bathroom starving for air, and his wife suddenly in distress over a man standing in his doorway. Like, which fucking thing do you attend to first? Well, this dude took one look at my dad and bolted out the door into the dark. My dad started to follow, but quickly realized he knew where the guy lived, and since it appeared he'd run off, there was no immediate threat. He yelled to my mom to go into the kitchen, and she grabbed me in a state of blind panic and pulled me with her. About 2 minutes later, the cops arrived, and one of them was a guy present a year earlier after the initial encounters. My mom started screaming, "He's out there! He was watching us!" The cops were completely confused now as well. This was supposed to be a medical emergency, but suddenly it was a home invasion. EMTs were quickly behind the cops and gave my sister an inhaler, and she started breathing again. Now all the attention was on the stalker, as it was clear he had to have been spying on my parents through a window and in his twisted mind thought he could save the day. The cops caught up with him running down the road and arrested him. He admitted under questioning that he'd been going for drives at night for months now and watching my mom through windows from the woods. He didn't really seem to understand what the big deal was. In the end, he pled guilty to trespassing and some sort of stalking-related crime and went to jail, though I'm not sure for how long. I've often thought about going back up to Connecticut to take a look at what records are available on the case. Nothing seems to exist online. According to my parents, the lack of any threats or actual violence sort of rendered the story unnewsworthy. My mom was so freaked out that my dad put in a transfer and we were back in Brooklyn by the fall. Although it's taken over 35 years, my mom can now tell the story with a laugh, but I don't think she ever got over that night. We found out from old neighbors years later in the late 90s that the guy had been in a group home post-jail and died from a heart attack. That's my story. Pretty scary, all true.
Want more Disturbed? Check out our Patreon for member-exclusive content, early merch access, and other cool perks. I'm your host, Doug Bailey, and this has been Disturbed, a production of Killer Podcasts and part of the Evergreen Network. For more paranormal and true crime shows, visit killerpodcasts.com. Follow our social channels at Disturbed Podcast on Instagram or Disturbed_pod on Twitter. If you enjoyed the show, please consider subscribing and reviewing on your favorite listening platform. Share your own true horror story at disturbedpodcast.com. Music by Epidemic Sound and by Carl Casey at White Bat Audio. Our producer is Declan Roars. Audio engineering by Nathan Corson, Will Prince, and Sean Rue Hoffman. Executive producer Bridget Coleman. Until next time, stay safe out there.